Salam everyone! Many of you know about my love of a town called Ashland in Oregon and OSF, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I have often referred to Ashland and OSF as my mistress. We've been together for over 40 years. Long-lasting relationships have roots that go back in time and are embedded with fond memories. Welcome to Storytime with Kumars. My name is Kayo Jijina, and this is my story titled Journey to Ashlandia, Part 1, Romeo Meets Juliette. I hope you enjoy it. I graduated high school in the spring of 1978. Summer was almost over and college would start in a couple of weeks. The drama teacher from Ballard High School, Earl Kelly, had encouraged me to squeeze in one more trip to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland before starting college. At night, my dreams told me I had to go, and after some convincing, Mom and Dad agreed. September 10th, Mom dropped me off at school. As she pulled into the parking lot, it was empty, void of people, charter buses. There was nothing to indicate anything was happening. Mom said goodbye and drove off. I had that anxious feeling, like I had somehow mixed the days up. As I dug into my rucksack, searching for the information sheet, a car pulled in, with a face I recognized. Eventually, people and cars began showing up, but no sign of the luxury bus. Most of the people I recognized, but there was a small group I had never seen before. They stuck to themselves. They talked over to the side. Slightly older than we were, I decided to call them the unknowns. My radar settled down after a black Lincoln Continental with suicide doors pulled into the parking lot. It was Mr. Kelly, the drama teacher. Without wasting time or engaging in small talk, Mr. Kelly divvied up the passengers amongst the unknowns, handed out some gas money, and told us he would see us in Ashland. The sound of warning bells went off in my head. If Mom and Dad had learnt about the switch from charter buses to private cars, the trip would have been a no-go. I could hear it in Dad's voice.
Son, how can someone not much older than you drive all that distance? They are not responsible enough, and it is not safe. Sorry, son, but you can't go.
What? I can't go? A classmate, Bill, and I were assigned to ride with Brian. His ride was a 1960s blue Volkswagen bus with the middle row of seats pulled out, which added a little to the legroom. It reminded me of the old buses brother and I used to take to go to and from school when we lived in Tehran. A cup of 7-Eleven coffee for Brian, and we were on our way. About an hour into the trip, the black Lincoln flew past us like we were standing still. Just as I began to doze off, the driver of our vehicle downshifted in a series of rapid successions. Bill and I desperately tried to hang on to our seats as Brian pulled onto the median of the freeway, slipped the transmission into reverse, and backed up some 200 feet before he slammed on the brakes a second time, returning Bill and I to our original seated positions. He opened the door and took off running. Parked behind us was the black Lincoln. Turned out Mr. Kelly had a flat tire. About 8 of us watched as Brian changed the tire, and off we went. The rest of the journey was uneventful, but it gave us a chance to talk. It turned out the unknowns were part of the Piccoli Theater group down at the Seattle Center, where Mr. Kelly was co-founder. It was early evening as we approached exit 19 off of Interstate 5 in Oregon and headed down towards 99 and the college. The time in between summer and fall quarters was when Southern Oregon State College offered special discounts on dorm rooms for students traveling to Ashland for the festival. I was assigned Jeff, and we were given room 203. Nothing fancy, a clean room with 2 beds and a study desk. After a restroom break, I inhaled one of my signature sandwiches, a Velveeta on Wonder Bread, and gave the second one to Jeff. The trek from the college down to Ashland, where the theater stood, was about 1.2 miles. That night's production was Richard III playing at the Elizabethan Theater. After a long day's journey and a sandwich, we sat on cold metal seats in an open-sky theater and watched one of Shakespeare's historical plays, which I just couldn't get into. By the time we got back, it was midnight and I was ready for sleep.
Mr. Kelly will see you downstairs in the big room in about 15 minutes. Bring your notebook and pencil.
A plague upon him. Abandoning all thoughts of sleep, I went downstairs into the hospitality room. The unknowns handed us a test and an assignment due by 9 a.m. the next day. Most of us stayed up working on the assignment and slid it under a designated door before finally falling asleep by 2 a.m. Morning came sooner than I would have liked. The first item on our agenda was a visit to the OSF Exhibit Center. The unknowns handed us a sheet of paper with items to be identified, very much like a scavenger hunt. Mr. Kelly informed us the exhibit center had moved from the historic Swedenborg House located on the corner of Siskiyou and Mountain into downtown Ashland, the corner of Pioneer and Main. It turned out not to be the case. Being the early birds, we traced our footsteps back and informed others on our way as we walked down Siskiyou Boulevard. All the while, I wondered if this was not another one of Mr. Kelly's treats. After the exhibition center, we made our way to Carpenter Hall for a noon lecture, followed by a 2 p.m. showing of Mother Courage at the Angus Bomer Theater. I decided to skip lunch and save the money. With the morning activities over, we had some downtime. A group of us walked back to the college and assembled outside in a small courtyard, surrounded by stairs. We were joined by another school group staying at the dorms. They seemed to be all girls. The fact that they didn't know us helped improve the odds they might actually talk to us. Eventually, one of the guys I was sitting with noticed movement coming from a second-floor balcony. I turned around and looked up in the direction of the building. An attractive young woman was looking out the open window down into the courtyard. The group of guys I was with began teasing each other on who had the courage to talk to her, which eventually led to a dare. Not sure why, but somehow the dare ended up on me. Realizing this was my chance to step out of myself, also known as showing off, I stood up. My study of Shakespeare was minimal, and like most novices, I had figured out if I added the words such as art, thou, and if to sentences, people might think I knew what I was doing.
Fair maiden,
I called out with the best voice I could find but had none.
How art thou?
Ooh, very good, my first art.
We have travelleth far, from a land called Seattle. We art students of the theatre, and cometh to study and learneth from the masters, the likes of Shakespeare, Tennessee, and Ford. At that moment I couldn't think of a third author, so I threw in a car for good measure. Ford was something I knew I could get away with. Chevrolet might have given me trouble. Explain thy trespass. What purpose bringeth thou here? To my way of thinking, I had done my part, and best to stop while I still had some dignity left. The young woman in the window smiled. I cometh seeking silly boys, who would play the part of a fool in front of all their friends. Sounds of laughter broke out in the courtyard. So much for the guys I was with having my back. They laughed louder than all the others. Touché, I called out to buy a little extra time as I thought up my next line. Taming of the Shrew came to mind. This fool is not just any fool, but a noble fool, fair maiden. I asketh, why thou haveth the tongue of a shrew? Come join this group of merry fellows for cheer. We promise to be gentlemen. What say ye? I had exhausted my lines when someone in the courtyard came to my rescue. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliette is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief.
Now, why didn't I think of that line?
All right, I'm coming down. Just give me a few minutes, said Juliette.
A few cheers broke out as we anxiously waited for Juliette to make her way down to the courtyard.